Committee will come to order. Events of recent days remind us that American national security cannot focus just on the Middle East or Africa or Europe. There are real and growing threats facing us in Asia as well. The erratic North Korean regime persistently marches toward more sophisticated nuclear weapons and longer-range missiles, despite past agreements it has signed and despite pressure from China and others. Meanwhile, China is also marching steadily toward making the South China Sea a private lake, fully under Chinese control. Again, regardless of the promises made or the pressure applied, it moves ahead with its own agenda. While we in the country are understandably alarmed at these developments, we've got to go beyond concern and decide how we will respond as we carry out our constitutional duties to raise and support, provide and maintain the military forces of the United States. The threats facing us in Asia cover a wide spectrum of military capability, from new modern nuclear warheads that are steadily being produced by the Chinese and determined efforts by North Korea to upgrade its nuclear arsenal, to missiles of increasing range and lethality, to hybrid war-like tactics, which we have seen in other theaters as well. To me, this means we must have a credible nuclear deterrent. We must have missile defense. We must have sufficient naval presence in order to deter some of what we are seeing in Asia. We also must work with key allies in the regions, strong allies such as Japan, the Republic of Korea, Taiwan, Australia, among others. Only together can we ensure that this vital region of the world continues to be an economic engine and will have peace and stability in the future. We're very grateful to have our witnesses today to help talk about the key role the United States military plays in achieving those goals. Before I turn to them, I'll yield to the distinguished acting ranking member, Ms. Davis from California.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. If I may, I want to ask unanimous consent to submit our ranking member Smith's statement for the record.
Without objection.
And I also wanted to welcome Admiral Harris and General Scaparrotti, and to thank you for appearing before our committee today. The Indo-Asia Pacific region is critical to our national interest, and despite your best efforts in promoting growth and prosperity through our committed presence and engagement, the challenges that we face, as you well know, are no small task. The North Korean regime resorts to brinkmanship and open provocation to further its objectives. North Korea's nuclear tests have openly defied the international call for a nuclear-free Korean peninsula, and the regime uses hybrid and asymmetric warfare to reinforce its survivability and to exert undue influence. As the chairman noted, we must work with our allies in the region to contain the North Korean regime and deter further aggression, and of course be prepared to act if necessary. Reinforcing our missile defense posture on the peninsula in coordination with South Korea is one step in the right direction. China continues to press its claims in the South China Sea, and their actions have shown that it too will resort to gray zone tactics short of open conflict to achieve foreign policy goals. Instead of further provocation, China should abide by internationally accepted norms and contribute to a peaceful and equitable resolution to the disputed claims. These developments, as we all acknowledge, emphasize the need for a persistent U.S. presence. We should continue to bolster collective security, help to peacefully address concerns, facilitate productive multilateral exchanges, encourage democratization efforts, and reinforce ties with our many allies and partners. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to our presenters today. Thank you again very much for being here and for your great service to our country. Thank you.
Thank the gentlelady. Just to remind members, immediately upon the conclusion of this open hearing, we will go to a closed classified session with our witnesses today. So if you have questions that touch on classified material, it would be best to do that later. I'm very pleased to welcome our witnesses today, Admiral Harry B. Harris, Commander, U.S. Pacific Command, and General Curtis Scaparrotti, Commander, United Nations Command, Combined Forces Command, and U.S. Forces in Korea. Without objection, both of your written statements will be made part of the record, and feel free to summarize them or make such other comments as you would like. Admiral Harris, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Chairman Thornberry and Representative Davis and distinguished members. It's an honor for me to appear before this committee. I'm pleased to be here with General Scaparrotti to discuss how U.S. Pacific Command is protecting America's interests across the vast Indo-Asia Pacific. Since taking command of Pacom last May, I've had the extraordinary privilege of leading the 400,000 soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, and civilians serving our nation. These dedicated men and women and their families are doing an amazing job, and I'm proud to serve alongside them. To provide you some issues of concern, I'd like to briefly highlight a few regional issues. As China continues its pattern of destabilizing militarization of the South China Sea, we resumed our freedom of navigation operations there, a waterway vital to America's prosperity, where $5.3 trillion in trade traverses each year. General Scaparrotti and I remain aligned in dealing with North Korea's recent underground nuclear test, followed by its ballistic missile launch. A revanchist Russia is revitalizing its ability to execute long-range strategic patrols in the Pacific, to include the basing of its newest strategic ballistic missile submarine and last month's bomber flights around Japan. Recent terrorist attacks in Bangladesh and Indonesia underscore the fact that violent Islamic extremism is a global concern that must be crushed. We've continued to strengthen our alliances and partnerships. Japan's peace and security legislation authorizing limited collective self-defense will take effect this year. This legislation and the revised guidelines for U.S.-Japan defense cooperation will significantly increase Japan's ability to work with us. Thanks to the great leadership of General Scaparrotti here, South Korea and the United States have taken a strong and unified stance to maintain peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula. In the face of recent North Korean aggression, Pacom hosted a tri-chad meeting between U.S. Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dunford, Japan Chairman Admiral Kawano, and South Korea Chairman General Lee. Trilateral cooperation between Japan, South Korea, and the United States is a priority, and I'm doing everything I can to enhance it. Our alliance with the Philippines took an important step forward when the Philippine Supreme Court recently upheld the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, or EDCA, which will provide significant partnership and access benefits. I'm also excited about our growing relationship with India, where I will visit next week. As the world's two largest democracies, we are uniquely poised to help bring greater security and prosperity to the entire region. Two visionary policies are now coinciding as the United States rebalances west to the Indo-Asia Pacific and India implements its Act East policy. Last month's Malabar exercise between India, Japan, and the United States shows the security interconnectedness of the Indian Ocean, Asia, and the Pacific Ocean. I rely heavily on Australia, not only for its advanced military capabilities across all domains, but importantly for Australia's warfighting experience in leadership and operations around the world. These examples clearly demonstrate to me that the United States is a security partner of choice in the Indo-Asia Pacific. It's also why I believe that our strategic rebalance has taken hold. Given that 4 of the 5 strategic problem sets identified by Secretary Carter, China, North Korea, Russia, and ISIL are in our region, I'd say that we can't rebalance fast enough. But there's more work to do, and we must not lose the momentum. So I ask this committee to support continued investment in future capabilities. I need weapon systems of increased lethality that go faster, go further, and are more survivable. If funding uncertainties continue, the U.S. will experience reduced warfighting capabilities, so I urge the Congress to repeal sequestration. Finally, I'd like to thank this committee and the whole Congress for your enduring support to Pacom, and to the men and women in uniform, our civilian teammates, and our families. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, sir. General?
Chairman Thornberry, Ranking Member Davis, and distinguished members of the committee, I'm honored to testify today as the Commander of United Nations Command, Combined Forces Command, and United States Forces Korea. On behalf of the American soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines, and our civilians serving in the Republic of Korea, thank you for your support. Admiral Harris, thank you for your vision and a professional support of the entire Pacom team for USFK. I prepared brief opening remarks, and I appreciate that my written posture statement is being entered into the record. Since my last testimony, Our U.S.-ROC alliance has continued to focus on advancing our combined capabilities. Some of these advanced capabilities include the establishment of the first U.S.-ROC Combined Division, additional rotations of U.S. forces to the peninsula, the execution of our annual combined training exercises, and steady progress on our $10.7 billion plan to relocate U.S. forces in Korea. Furthermore, the Republic of Korea has improved its capabilities with the recent establishment of the Korean Air Missile Defense System and Center and the Allied Korea Joint Command and Control System. The Republic of Korea has also invested in modern equipment with the purchase of the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, Global Hawk, the Patriot Advanced Capability 3 missile upgrades, and also H-64 Apache helicopters. These alliance advances help counter the real and the proximate North Korean threat. North Korea continues to conduct provocations and to resource its large conventional force. And of greater significance, North Korea continues to aggressively develop nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles in direct violation of the UN Security Council resolutions, as demonstrated with its fourth nuclear test and its fifth TD-2 launch in January and February. In regards to this threat, my top concern remains the potential for a North Korean provocation to start a cycle of action and counteraction which could quickly escalate, similar to what we experienced this past August. While I am proud to report that our alliance stood shoulder to shoulder and de-escalated the situation, it could have spiraled out of control and demonstrates why we must remain ready to fight tonight. To maintain this level of readiness, we will continue to focus on sustaining, strengthening, and transforming the alliance with an emphasis on our combined readiness in 4 critical areas. First, ISR remains my top readiness challenge. CFC USFK requires additional, persistent, all-weather ISR capabilities, as well as dependable moving target indicator support to maintain situational awareness and provide adequate decision space. Second, it is critical for the alliance to establish a layered and interoperable ballistic missile defense. To advance this goal, in the near future, we will begin bilateral consultations regarding the feasibility of deploying the THAAD system to the Republic of Korea, which would complement the Patriot system's capabilities. Third, we must maintain an adequate quantity of critical munitions to ensure alliance supremacy in the early days of conflict on the peninsula. This requirement is further amplified by the approaching loss of cluster munitions due to shelf life expiration and the impending ban. And fourth, we must focus on command, control, communications, computers, and intelligence, or C4I. Both the United States and the Republic of Korea are investing in new tactical equipment that will comprise a reliable C4I architecture, but more is required. In closing, I would like to express how proud I am of our service members, our civilians and their families serving in the Republic of Korea, who never lose sight of the fact that they're serving on freedom's frontier. I would also like to recognize Ambassador Mark Lippert, Admiral Harry Harris, and the U.S. and ROC senior leaders for their enduring commitment to our mission. I thank you and this committee for your support, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, sir. Let me ask you each to address really a very basic question, and that is, do you have the military forces required to fulfill the missions you have been assigned? And Admiral Harris, you mentioned the freedom of navigation operations, which have been underway. From what one reads, they're pretty few and far between, and don't seem to be making much of a difference, because we also read that the Chinese have put surface-to-air missiles on these new islands they are constructing. So if you could address broadly in your theater, do you have the military forces to carry out the missions you are assigned, and then more specifically the Chinese South China Sea issues that have arisen?
Yes, sir. Happy to do that. With regard to the first issue of do I have the forces necessary to conduct our missions today, I feel I do. I think we're set up well in NDAA 16, thanks to the Congress for that. and in the budget submission for FY17, it meets the concerns that I had in the past. That FY17 budget addresses those concerns. So I'm comfortable with where we are today, but today we're not at war, and I think that's an important point. There are concerns that I have, clearly. As General Scaparrotti mentioned, there are concerns about munitions. My submarine numbers, and I mentioned this yesterday during my testimony, I don't have the submarines that I feel I need, but that's a function of the total number of submarines that the United States Navy has and the global demand for that platform. More persistent intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft and systems, ISR, is a requirement, I think, as well as cyber and getting after cyber. I've testified in the past and I've spoken in the past about the need for a long-range anti-surface missile, a missile that can outstick, if you will, Chinese missile systems in the Pacific and so on. And I'm pleased that in the FY17 budget, you know, there's funds put against development of LRASM, the long-range anti-surface missile. Secretary of Work recently spoke about the work that's been done to improve the SM-6 missile and give it an anti-surface, an anti-ship capability, which I think is dramatic, and that's exactly what I need in the Pacific. With regard to your question about China's actions, in my opinion, China's intent to militarize the South China Sea is as certain as a traffic jam in D.C. It is no doubt in my mind what their intent is. Their SSMs, their surface, their SAMs rather, their missiles on Woody Island, their 10,000-foot runways that they're building in Subi Reef and Fiery Cross Reef and elsewhere, their advanced radars that we saw pictures of the last couple of days at Corton Reef. These are all indications of militarization, and in my mind, they are changing the operational landscape of the South China Sea.
And if you could address, sir, the freedom of navigation operations, do you have enough ships, and what kind of ships would you say are most effective for those sorts of operations?
Sure. So on the freedom of navigation operations, clearly have enough ships to do that. The 7th Fleet out there, home-ported principally in Japan, has the ships, the requisite ships to do freedom of navigation operations. The best kind of ship, in my opinion, to do that is a DDG-51 class, Arleigh Burke class destroyer, highly capable, the right kind of weapons, and the right kind of systems to ensure that freedom of navigation operations are conducted well and the ship is well able to defend itself should those operations go awry. Regarding the frequency of freedom of navigation operations and their effect on China's militarization in the South China Sea, freedom of navigation operations, the military part of that, the freedom of navigation operation itself, is only a part of the broader policy approach to what China is doing. So I think that my part of that, the execution of the operation itself, is one piece of it, and I think we're doing that, as I said, and we'll be doing more of it, as I've spoken before in other venues. We'll be doing them more, and we'll be doing them with greater complexity in the future, and as the Secretary said, we'll fly, sail, and operate wherever international law allows. And then there's a policy piece to it, and a diplomatic piece, and a political piece to it, and that's for the whole government effort on moving China and their position in the South China Sea.
General, do you have the forces you need to carry out the mission to which you have been assigned?
Chairman, thank you for the question. I would say that, first of all, for the forces on the peninsula, I enjoy being financed or budgeted at the very top of the priority list. So the forces are getting the funding to do the exercises, the training, and assets they need on the peninsula to be ready to fight tonight. And I appreciate the support of this committee in ensuring that we do have that resourcing. But as I noted in my opening comments, there are areas of concern. First is ISR. On the Korean Peninsula, we're facing a foe that is 1 million strong, and it's literally 35 miles from the capital, and the half of their population, of the Korean population, 35 miles away, with an adversary that uses a cycle of provocation. So typically, I think I have about 12 hours or less warning. And persistent ISRs allows me to have that indication and warning and to set my posture to first defend South Korea and the large American citizen population that we have there as well. So ISR is something that's at the top of my list. I mentioned ballistic missile defense. You're well aware of the large arsenal that North Korea has in ballistic missiles. That is growing in strength but also in accuracy. I think that the discussions we're having right now to add THAAD to the Korea is very important. We need THAAD there to have a layered defense. I need more munitions so that I have the first 30 days of munitions for the fight in terms of interceptors. And I rely on the quick deployment of at least 2 more battalions of Patriot as well if we go to crisis. So, the assets of BMD there, the more that I have there, the better protected we are. And I think those are the primary of those 4 that I would mention shortly here, and I can go into more detail later.
Thank you. Ms. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, appreciate you both being here. I wonder if you could expand a little bit more on the South China Sea issues, obviously the militarization there and China's consolidation of its claims and rejection of internationally accepted methods of dispute. So how might we best mitigate the risk of miscalculation leading to increased tensions or even conflict in the area?
Yeah, well, I think, ma'am, that short of military confrontation, which we all want to avoid, I think the way forward, the best way to go forward is to present and maintain our credible military power and to maintain our network of like-minded allies, partners, and friends in the region and encourage them to operate in the South China Sea. And we must continue to operate in the South China Sea to demonstrate that water space and the air above it is international and not the territory of any nation. I think the diplomacy, obviously, is probably the most important thing. We need to encourage China to act as a responsible actor on the international space when it comes to things like the South China Sea. Secretary Kerry recently said at Sunnylands that we have only one policy with regard to the South China Sea, and that's a negotiated settlement. That's to negotiate and work with China, and that's kind of where I am on that.
Thank you, Admiral. And perhaps, General Scaparrotti, with your hat as well, how do we better complement then our efforts? Certainly you're speaking to the defense lane very, very appropriately here today, but I'm wondering about other federal agencies and working with them in diplomatic, economic, and certainly assistance efforts in that kind of holistic way. What are we doing? Which could we be doing more? Where are the gaps?
Well, I think, we know from experience that the holistic approach is always the most effective. And so I think including Treasury, many of the other agencies here, including them in all that we do, in USFK as a subcomponent command, we also have close connection to all those agencies that work with Pacom, and they're regularly a part of our planning. Our exercises, in fact, the one we'll do this next month. And I think that type of close collaboration with all the agencies in our government, bringing them into the planning, the exercises that we do, gives them good awareness. And then as things happen in the theater, we have a relationship, we have understanding, and we can work and collaborate much more quickly.
And do you see a greater role for Congress in this as well, since we tend to stay in our lanes also?
Well, I do, and I appreciate the fact that many members of Congress come out to see us. Particularly, I know it's a long trip to Korea, but I think Korea is a place that that is complex, and until you've stood on the DMZ, then just that picture alone is quite informative, and I appreciate the fact that so many make the trip and have the conversation and the discussion with us.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Admiral General, thank you so much for your service. I want to thank you, the service members, military families. What a commitment, protecting American families, also protecting our great allies. And Admiral Harris, I'm particularly grateful that I've had the opportunity to visit with you in the past. And to me, you're a living example of America's alliance with Japan. It's just, to me, so historic and inspiring to know that we have a Japanese American as the U.S. Pacific Commander at Pearl Harbor, how far we've come. And, and just being in your presence has just been so positive and has to be reassuring to the people all over Asia. Also, I'm very grateful that my family's had an association with Asia. My dad served in the Flying Tigers during World War II, and I grew up hearing from him a great affection for the people of China and the people of India. And so I'm hopeful that indeed positive can continue to advance. But with that in mind, Admiral, I appreciate your interest in maintaining our technological superiority, and later today there will be a subcommittee hearing of the Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittee on the Department of Defense Science and Technology programs. These issues continue to be of crucial importance to this committee, particularly the chairman, and this is key to our warfighters' future success. Could you please describe what do you see as the right balance between investing in future capabilities like the third offset strategy and getting the commander what he needs now? How has the FY17 budget request prioritized the modernization affecting your command?
Thanks, sir, for those questions. I'll just start by talking about General Stilwell just for a second. There's an article in today's clips about how the Chinese are honoring General Stilwell in Chongqing in China in a museum that's run by the government there, and the relationship that he formed and his feelings for the Chinese. So I think that's an appropriate way to start this off. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
With regard to the FY17 request, it has, I think, a good mix in it of funding for what we need today and funding for technological innovations such as the third offset. Recently, Secretary of Work talked about the SCO office, the Special Capabilities Office, and the work that they're doing. And this is important stuff as we seek to not only modernize our force, but also to maintain the force we have. And so, you know, as a combatant commander, I don't have the luxury of waiting 5 years for the next great thing that's going to come down the pike, because I have to be ready to fight tonight. And that's the stance that we take in the Pacific. Most epitomized by General Scaparrotti and the challenge that he has on a peninsula. So, you know, I can't say to you all, hey, just give me a 5-year break here while we wait for the next technology thing to come down the road. So I need to have a modernized, capable military today, but I recognize as a uniformed officer that we have to modernize. And so that's the challenge, I think, for the service chiefs. You know, I talked yesterday about how much easier it is to be an insatiable combatant commander than it is to be a service chief in 2016. But as a nation, we have an insatiable need for security, and rightfully so. And so, you know, it comes to the point, I guess, in the forward forces. So I'm pleased with how my input to the Secretary was upheld in the FY17 budget. and I'm pleased that budget not only ensures that I have a modern, capable force to fight today, but that the needs that I've identified, the shortfalls that we talked about in the last question, are being addressed.
And we look forward to your input. And General Scaparrotti, China and North Korea's increased utilization of hybrid warfare. Are we prepared for cyber warfare potential on the Korean Peninsula?
Sir, it's one of my concerns, given that North Korea has made a deliberate effort to improve their capabilities as much as they can. Kim Jong-un has stated that, and as you know, he's demonstrated their capability with Sony and the attack on South Korea's media and banking industries in 2013. So I'm very concerned about it. I would answer your question and say, yes, I believe we're prepared today on our, defense of our military systems and within the cyber domain, but it's a rapidly developing domain, an area that we have to stay on it every day. We specifically have been working on our joint cyber center. I've recently been added a cyber mission team specifically for Korea, and that is building now. That's a great addition to our capability. I would mention to you that I also have another concern, and that is that I'm within an alliance. Iraq's capability and ours, so we're collaborating with their joint cyber center as well to make sure that we don't have a vulnerability because of our combined systems, et cetera. And that's work that we need to continue to do.
Thank you.
Mr. Larson.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. And thanks, gentlemen, for making it out. On the West Coast, it's not that far to go to Korea. So maybe from here it is, but it's not that far from home. So we get a lot of questions about when North Korea does things and when China does things. First, for Admiral Harris, a couple of reports have come out recently. One looking at the rebalance strategy and what can be done to improve that and enhance that. One suggestion is out of CSIS. One suggestion was a Western Pacific Joint Task Force. I was wondering what your opinions about that are, and in the answer, if you could relate that to building partnership capabilities and whether or not, much like we do with NATO, there's a NATO commitment of a 2% of GDP, but we can do that in a formal structure. If there's a value of an informal commitments from our friends and allies in the region to invest in their capabilities to support regional objectives. And then I've got a question for the General after that.
Hey, sir, good to see you.
See you.
On the CSIS study, I've read it. They had a number of interesting recommendations in there. I had a meeting with the CSIS leadership and spoke to them in my last trip to Washington. On the idea of a maritime task force for the Western Pacific, we have one, and it's called Pacom. And if there's some smaller entity of that, we have that also, and it's called the 7th Fleet. So I'm very comfortable with the command and control structure and the forces as they are arrayed under Pacom. So there's a commander of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, which is a JTF certified large combatant level staff headed up by a 4-star that can carry out any operation that I need. The same with U.S. Army Pacific, General Brooks, 4-star Army General, huge land forces under his command that can do that if necessary. And then in the far Pacific, in the Far East, there's the U.S. 7th Fleet and all of its capability. There's a 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force and all of its capability. So I think that we have in existence today the thing that CSIS recommended by another name. So I'm comfortable with that, but I appreciate the insights that I got from their study. Regarding partner capabilities, we could not do what we need to do alone, and we have great allies and partners in the region. I'll start with Japan and its capability, a very powerful military, a tremendous maritime self-defense force, a great submarine force, a very capable land force, and a very strong air force in Japan. And on the other end of the globe down there is Australia, a partner and ally who has been with the United States, fought with us in virtually every conflict in the 20th century and certainly into the 21st century. They have a highly specialized, highly trained, very capable military that are completely aligned in terms of equipment and training and that with the United States. So as I mentioned in my opening statement, I rely heavily on Australia, not only for their operational capability, but for their warfighting experience and advice. I think we'll not see anything resembling NATO in the Pacific. Each country there is so different, and they face different levels of threat. They have different levels of relationships with other countries that I don't think we'll get this large, broad, multilateral alliance like NATO. But the good news is we have strong alliances with 5 nations in the Pacific. We have strong partnerships with a whole lot more, and we are working working strongly on improving trilateral cooperation between the U.S., Japan, and Korea, between the U.S., Japan, and Australia, and the U.S., Japan, and India.
Okay. Yeah, I just have very few seconds left for. Thank you, General. Just quickly, would the ROCs be prepared today for THAAD if there was an agreement today to deploy THAAD to the Republic of Korea? And if not, what does that timeline look like?
Representative, we'll have we're forming a joint working group that I think will have its first meeting probably within a week. I think we'll have that settled. THAAD's a complex system. It's going to take some time for us to find the right location, because where you locate it makes a difference to how effective it is. So we've got to find the right location and do that work, which we'll do in accordance with our SOFA. I'm confident that process will go well. But at this point, it's difficult for me to tell you what the timeline looks like. But I should be able to do that, and relatively soon.
Mr. Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General Scaparrotti, I wanted to follow up on that area. Given Kim Jong-un's erratic behavior and recent nuclear test and ballistic missile tests, what capabilities do you need to make sure you can maintain the security of your forces as well as the ROK?
As I said, the most important to me is ISR, because it allows me to be in the proper posture, to be able to get ahead of whatever it is he intends to do. And on the Korean Peninsula, I've got a very large conventional force in very close proximity to Seoul. That's one problem set. And then I have their asymmetric problem set, which is primarily their nuclear, their missile, their soft forces, the largest soft forces in the world, 60,000 strong, long-range artillery capability, and their cyber. Many of those are deeper into the country, so it's a very difficult ISR challenge, probably one of the toughest in the world given the terrain, mountainous.
Are your current ISR capabilities adequate?
I need more persistence, sir. That would be very, very helpful. So that's the one that I come up, and then the other 4 in particular that I mentioned earlier are the ones that I most need.
Great, thank you. Admiral Harris, can you please explain the advantages of ensuring that U.S. Patriot battalions have modular capability?
Clearly, Congressman, because of the mobility associated with that, and the fact that I can move the Patriots around with some degree of flexibility. So in the Pacific, Patriot is a key part of our ballistic missile defense, as is THAAD. So we have a THAAD battery in Guam that's there on a temporary basis now, expected to go to a permanent status, PCS status, if you will, later this year. And then, as General Scaparrotti mentioned, as we work with the Koreans to consult on putting THAAD in Korea as well. Then the other part of that, of course, is Aegis. So,
speaking about Aegis, my understanding is the discussion was to take the Aegis Ashore site there in Hawaii and activate it, and instead of just being a training facility. Now I hear there's discussion of closing it down. What's going on with it?
Well, so I talked about my desire to keep it as a permanent facility because it's demonstrated a great capability. Now, it was built as a training facility and testing facility for the Aegis Ashore sites in Europe. But I think we should study it. I think we should take a hard look at it and whether we want to make it a permanent facility or not. But there's a lot between now and then. Okay. Now, this is just an idea now. But the Aegis Ashore in Hawaii, for example, has no interceptors, right? I mean,
yeah, we'd have to put them in. I agree.
And so there's a lot there, but I think it's worthy of study, and that's kind of where we are now. So we're a long way from making a decision either way right now.
Great. As I read the President's budget, there's 4 baseline 9 destroyers that we're losing. Were any of those going to Pacom, and if so, what's the effect of losing those destroyers?
I'll be honest with you, I'm not familiar with that number, but we are getting new baseline 9 destroyers in Japan now. We're sitting out there and part of the overseas home porting program. So in the Pacific, I'm comfortable with where we are with regard to that capability. And that is a tremendous capability. I mean, that ties together
right.
the E2D and the Aegis system for this thing we call cooperative engagement. Right. So I'm pleased with that.
What's the benefit of having an Aegis Ashore site in Japan for the U.S. and for Japan?
So I don't know that there's a benefit to it. You know, we have Japan has Patriot batteries, and that they're very capable. We have the TPY-2 radar systems at Shiriki and Kasumigaseki, and those are helpful. I think there's a study in place to look at whether an Aegis Ashore site has utility in Japan, but it's premature for me to make that statement now.
Yeah, my understanding was it would free up our Aegis ships in the Asian Pacific. Is that not?
That could be. I mean, certainly.
Okay.
Certainly.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Bardallo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to remind my colleagues that my home is next door to North Korea when we talk about distances. So, Admiral in General, thank you for your testimony and for your service and leadership. Mr. Whitman and I were just out in your region a day ago and appreciated the opportunity to get updates on the progress we're making in realigning forces and trying to posture our force to respond to the environment in the region. One of the things that people become aware of when traveling in the region is the tyranny of distance. This is never more evident than when it comes to making sure we maintain a forward and deployed fleet. And Admiral, you noted the need for more submarines as a top priority yesterday. To support this, I believe it is critical that we maintain robust ship repair and dry dock capabilities, including at a nuclear-capable level in the Western Pacific. Now, you wrote a letter to the Guam Economic Authority stating, and I quote, "The Navy has consistently stated a robust ship repair capability in Guam as a matter of strategic importance and remains an operational priority for the Pacific Fleet." Do you continue to share this view, Admiral?
I do, Congresswoman.
Admiral, in your testimony before the SAC yesterday, the Japan press picked up on a 2-year delay in IOC for the Futenma replacement facility. And I believe this delay is due to legal challenges after the election of Governor Onaga. I just want the people of Guam to be clear about whether this delay in Okinawa would impact Guam. And as you know, the 2012 2+2 statement delinks progress on Futenma from progress on Guam. Moreover, Chairman Whitman noted in his recent visit to Guam that we were light years ahead of where progress stood several years ago. So I would note that we have made great progress. So can you comment on this progress on Guam in the coming years and the importance of the investments in military construction for Guam in this year's budget? And how does that help you as Pacom commander address the changing nature of threats in the Asia-Pacific region?
Yes, ma'am. I believe that Guam is a strategic bastion for the United States. The capabilities that are there and its location demand that we consider it a strategic bastion. And so, you know, we have put our fourth SSN there, nuclear submarine there, and we brought in our second submarine tender there. So that's very exciting, and I think the right level of emphasis on our submarine force in the Western Pacific. With regard to FATENMA, I would defer to the Marine Corps on where they stand on the linkages between the FATENMA replacement facility and the exodus of that group of Marines from Okinawa to both Guam and Hawaii. But clearly, the plan as conceived was, you know, we would move Marines from FATENMA to Camp Schwab, Hanoko, and then subsequently move Marines, a group of Marines, 8,000 or so, from Okinawa to Hawaii and Guam and Hawaii in that order. But whether we're going to link that now or not, given that there is a delay in the movement of forces from FATENMA to Schwab, I'll have to defer to the Marine Corps on that.
I just want to be clear as to whether Guam would be affected.
It would only be affected perhaps in terms of timing, but the intent to move Marines to Guam remains as strong as ever. That intent is there, and the resources we're putting into Guam and in the Commonwealth of Northern Marianas, that is proceeding apace.
Thank you, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Whitman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your service, and thank you for the great job that you're doing there in the Asia Pacific. As Ms. Bordallo said, we had a great trip there. Admiral Harris, I want to ask your perspective. As we got the laydown on the situation there in the Asia Pacific, one of the things that was really compelling to me was the effort by the Chinese in the South China Sea. As you pointed out, their efforts there on Woody Island and the Paracels is something that is done. There's nothing that we can do to necessarily reverse that. The place, though, where I do believe we can have an impact is in the Spratly Islands. As you know, over 3,000 acres of reclamation there. Those places are set up specifically, I believe, for them to militarize those areas. As you spoke in your opening testimony, you talked about submarines as one of the elements that you have as a critical part of force structure. There's also a suggestion of a second aircraft carrier. In looking at what we can do to deter or prevent further militarization of the South China Sea, give me your perspective on the priority that you would need as far as naval assets. And I'm asking you, submarines versus the second aircraft carrier. Give me what your priorities would be in that situation.
Thanks, Congressman. My priority, given the way you framed the question, is clearly submarines. Submarines are the original stealth platform. They are clearly give us an asymmetric advantage. Our asymmetry in terms of warfare because of submarines is significant. And, you know, in the modernizing sense, we need to maintain that asymmetric advantage. The second aircraft carrier, you know, I'm a combatant commander, and I want more, and I want it now, right? The more I can get, the faster I can get it, the happier I am. Sure. But I think there are fiscal, diplomatic, and political hurdles, significant ones, to overcome before we would put a second carrier strike group in the Western Pacific. You know, when you talk about an air wing, where would you put it? Where would you train them? The 10,000 sailors, their families, the housing, the schools, the hospitals, the whole thing. But there are other things that we could do, in my opinion, that would improve our capability in the Western Pacific and have an effect. We could consider putting another SSN submarine out there. We could put additional destroyers forward. We could put maybe the new destroyer, the DDG-1000s, move them forward. So there are a lot of things we can do short of putting a full carrier strike group in the Western Pacific.
Very good. And you believe that's the most effective way that we could deter further militarization there in the Spratlys?
I think that's a big part of it.
Good.
Yes.
Very good. Thanks, Admiral Harris. General Scaparrotti, I appreciate your time when we were there visiting at U.S. Forces Korea and the great job that you're doing there. One of the questions I wanted to ask is, as you look at your needs, and as you pointed out, the threat, ISR, a critical portion of that to make sure you can look at what potentially is happening to the north. Another element, though, that is important is if you do need to act, is to make sure that you have not only the information and the people, the manning, but also the hardware. Give me your perspective on where you are right now as far as munition stores and whether they are adequate for what you look at as the potential scenarios there with North Korea.
Thank you, sir, for the question. As you know, I'll first describe the conflict on the Korean Peninsula because while we have seen provocation, if we went to conflict in the Korean Peninsula, given the size of the forces and the weaponry involved, this would be more akin to the Korean War and World War II. Very complex, probably high casualty, and because of that, first of all, it's going to be a situation where I want to be ahead of that and be able to deter the aggressor. So my need is particularly to have the forces, the ballistic missile defense forces, et cetera, so that when I pick up the indication and warning, I can establish my defense, protect South Korea, our forces and our population there immediately. I think I have a good force for doing that today on the peninsula, but I also rely on Pacom for immediate forces to respond. For example, the Air Forces stationed in Japan and throughout the Pacom theater, ISR to be responsive, the Marine Force and MEF to be responsive. And we keep a package, we being Pacom commander, his force, his subordinate commands, and myself, that we know the readiness of those forces on any given day and any given hour that I need immediately. And we track those. And that's very important to my ability to respond and defend Korea.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you. General, I've had a request from the recording people. If you'd make sure the microphone is right in front of your face, then it seems to work better. Thank you, sir. Mr. Courtney.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to both witnesses for your leadership and your testimony this morning. Admiral, on page 5 of your testimony, you pretty much laid out what is sort of the guidepost for the sovereignty claims issues, which we've discussed this morning with the island building. And basically it said we encourage all countries to uphold international laws reflected in the Law of the Sea Convention. Should the United States ratify UNCLOS, the Law of the Sea Treaty?
Thanks, sir, for the question. Before I answer it, I want to just say that I've spent a lot of time talking to proponents and opponents of UNCLOS in the last 3 or 4 months, and I appreciate the time I've spent with those experts, and I understand their arguments, and I understand those arguments for those folks who are opposed to UNCLOS. But I'm a proponent of it, and I think in the 21st century, our moral standing is affected by the fact that we're not signatory to UNCLOS. I think there are some economic disadvantages as well. We could get into a discussion about the Russian stuff in the Arctic and how they're using UNCLOS to their advantage, and we're unable to because we're not a signatory to it. So, you know, I would tell the members of this committee and anyone else that, for me personally, my opinion is the United States should accede to UNCLOS.
Thank you. And again, when we discussed this at Pacom earlier, or last fall, that was before the Hague Convention ruled against the United States' request to be part of the, just an observer, and the Philippines' claim on the Spratly Islands, which Mr. Whitman referred to earlier. I mean, it's kind of unbelievable. We're allowing sort of litigation to proceed that the consequences in terms of military strategy and resources of this country in Asia Pacific could hinge on the outcome of that claim, and we're completely shut out because of an unforced error. I mean, we've done this to ourselves, and And so, thank you for your frankness this morning. Myself and Congressman Don Young are going to introduce a bipartisan resolution in the House, again, citing events in the South China Sea as why we really need to take a fresh look at the Law of the Sea Treaty, and as a nation, we need to move forward and get in the game in terms of these critical issues, because it is going to determine the course of maritime policy and military policy and budgets for decades to come. So thank you again for that input. Earlier, you mentioned the fact that we have a shortage of submarines in Asia Pacific. Again, today we're operating with an attack subfleet of about 52. Even with the 2-a-year build rate that we started in 2011, that's going to continue to drop to, at this point, based on the shipbuilding plan that was submitted last week, to 41. Can you talk about what that will do to future commands in terms of the challenges that you're already facing with a larger fleet size?
Sure. So Pacom suffers a shortage of submarines today. My requirements are not being met. As are not the requirements of other COCOMs as well. So we have a submarine force of about 52 attack submarines, and all the COCOMs need them for all their reasons. And when you add up all their requirements, it exceeds the ability of the Navy to provide submarines forward when you consider a lot of those are in maintenance and a lot of other things. I worry that we're going to go down to 41, because as we go down to the low 40s, China is going to increase their submarine force even as they are today. And then Russia, which has the most capable submarine force in the world next to ours, they're moving their latest generation SSBNs, the ballistic missile submarines, to the Pacific. So the Dogoruki class SSBNs got there at the end of last year, and that's just the beginning. And then China, meanwhile, has their JIN class SSBNs that they're bringing online, and we're seeing them now. I feel that I must be able to keep those submarines at risk, and I'm able to do so today. But as we go down in numbers, then that becomes a concern to me.
Right. Thank you. And we have actually an opportunity on Sea Power to look at the next block contract, because frankly there's a dip in that, and we should do everything we can to avoid that, because that will at least bring the number up somewhat and mitigate what you just described. As long as I have 10 seconds left and people are boasting about proximity to Asia Pacific, if an attack submarine leaves Groton, Connecticut and goes under the ice, it can actually get there ahead of the folks from Washington State. And with that, I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank God for Connecticut.
Mr. Franks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, General Scaparrotti and Admiral Harris, for being here, all your entourage, for your commitment to protecting us all. We appreciate it. Sometimes you don't get told that enough. Admiral Harris, I guess I'll start out with a really easy question. Are you aware of any collusion between Iran and North Korea with regards to North Korea's intermittent but ongoing nuclear and ballistic missile tests?
Sir, I'm not aware of collusion directly. But we know that there's a relationship between North Korea and Iran. But I'm not privy to the details of the nuclear collusion, if you will.
General Scaparrotti, that's your perspective as well?
That's mine as well. Yes, sir.
Admiral, your colleague here, General Scaparrotti, called BMD one of USKF's 4 critical needs, and certainly that's but given the unpredictable and belligerent nature of the North Korean regime, combined with their steadily increasing ballistic missile technology, how important do you believe this layered missile defense system that we have is in deterring North Korea? And in light of some of the recent events that I think are pretty serious, can you describe if you think that there are currently enough defense assets in your command to deter or defeat a North Korean ballistic missile attack?
Well, first I'll talk about the criticality of a layered defense. It's absolutely critical. You know, we have 28,000 American troops on the Korean Peninsula. We have their families. We have several 100,000 Americans who live and work in South Korea. And the North Korean capability is growing. And they threaten not only our fellow citizens and our allies in Korea. They threaten Japan, they threaten Hawaii, the west coast of the mainland United States, and then potentially the east coast. They're on a quest to miniaturize their nuclear weapons and a means to deliver them intercontinentally, and they pose a very real threat to the United States. So I think the layered defense is the only answer to go after the missiles once launched. Yeah. That means THAAD, and I'm glad we're engaged in consultations with Korea on putting a THAAD battery there, Patriot, Aegis, the whole thing.
Well, how has the FY17 budget request, prioritization of modernization, affected your commands? I mean, do you currently have the assets you need to fight tonight while currently modernizing?
I'm pleased with the FY17 budget. I was asked, you know, to make comments about it up my chain, and my concerns were addressed. And principally those concerns were in anti-surface weapons and anti-surface ship missiles and in advanced fighter aircraft for the Pacom theater.
All right. I guess let me put it this way, and I'll address the question to both of you. If there is anything that you feel like that if you had the option that you could increase in terms of your capability in any particular area, what would that be?
In my case, sir, I would ask for more Joint Strike Fighters, more fifth-generation aircraft to go after the A2AD threat that we face in the Pacific.
General Scaparrotti?
Sir, I'd say one high-altitude, multi-intelligence surveillance and reconnaissance assets, and I'd go back to the ballistic missile defense assets. For instance, Patriot. It would be ideal to have more Patriot than I have now, as opposed to relying on the additional Patriot at crisis. But the fact of the matter is that our missile defense forces are stretched. There's great demand around the globe for similar kinds of threats. THAAD, for instance, same. So, you know, if I were to tell you what more could I use, and we had the budget to do it, I think those would be my top two right there.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to do something crazy. I'm going to yield back my last 18 seconds, and thank you all very much.
Chair appreciates that. Ms. Songas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. I, too, just returned from Japan. I was part of a congressional delegation that spent 3 days in Tokyo and 2 days in Okinawa. And I had spent years there. Many years ago, I was a high school student there. And as I hadn't been back in the interim, I really was struck by the tremendous changes in that country, but also in the relationship we have developed with Japan. Because at the time I lived there, it was really not too long after World War II, and there was certainly an effort to constrain Japan militarily and to yet to reassure it about its being protected. So as we've moved forward, we're in a very different environment, and I appreciate the rationale for it as things have really changed in that part of in the Asia-Pacific area. And Admiral, you referenced the peace and security legislation that Japan just passed that really authorizes it to engage in a more expansive way in regional security efforts. And one of the questions I had there and posed there was, is money following that? As Japan is as the ties are being loosened on what it can do and cannot do militarily, is funding following that effort so that they absorb a little more of the responsibility, financial responsibility for protecting that part of the world?
Thank you, Congresswoman. I believe it is, but I don't know that for a fact. I know that the government and the Prime Minister have said that funding will follow, that they're going to fund their aspirations to improve their military and their capability. But I will also add that the primary costs of our U.S. forces in Japan are paid for by Japan.
Yes, and what is that amount? I know we were given a figure over there. Do you know off the top of your head?
No, ma'am, but I'll find out before the closed hearing.
I would welcome that.
It's in the hundreds of billions of dollars, but I'll find that out and get back to you on that.
Thank you for that. And the other issue that came up, too, was sort of encouraging jointness between Japan's security forces and our forces as we are seeking ways to work together. And I'm wondering how you're thinking that through and encouraging that.
And encouraging
Jointness, more joint operations between our forces and theirs.
Yeah, so everything we're doing is joint these days in the U.S. side. And I think that other countries are observing that and learning from that. So last fall, we had an SLS, a Senior Leaders Seminar with the Japan Joint Staff, which is their joint headquarters in Tokyo. And we went through some of our war planning and some of our efforts in that arena. So I think Japan recognizes that they need to be more joint within their military than they are, and they're working with us closely to improve their jointness. So I was honored last week to travel to Japan, and I spoke at the 10th anniversary of the Japan Joint Staff. And I've been associated with Japan, their military, for most of my career, and they are far and away further along in jointness today than they have been. That's not to say that they don't have a ways to go. And I think that the jointness between their Air Force and their Navy, for example, it should be improved. I think they're, and I think they recognize that. They are moving toward a greater amphibious capability, and that forces a level of cooperation between their ground self-defense force and their maritime self-defense force. So I'm very optimistic about where Japan is going in terms of jointness and their ability to work with us in a joint manner across our services.
And that's what I felt was really what I was getting at. Is they're working with us as much as they are with them, within the different branches of their services.
That's right.
Thank you. I too will yield back the balance of my time.
And we're on a roll here. Mr. Bridenstine.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both for being here. It's an honor to have you before our committee. Certainly, I've spent plenty of time in the Pacific as a Navy pilot myself, now serving in the Oklahoma Air National Guard. General Scaparrotti, I wanted to ask you, or actually share with you, one of my big concerns I've heard from one of my constituents. I want to make you aware of a recent Army regulation change regarding dining facility use for rotationally deployed forces under your command. Effective February 15, 2016, the Army declared essential unit messing for rotationally deployed soldiers serving in the Pacific. In other words, all soldiers deployed temporary duty to Korea must use the dining facility, the DFAC. This policy will literally take money out of soldiers' pockets, hundreds of dollars per month, in two ways. First, the Army will charge for meals at the DFAC through automatic payroll deductions. That's automatic payroll deductions. These deductions will occur whether or not a soldier actually uses the DFAC. And as you're aware, when you do missions in these areas, those missions happen during breakfast, happen during lunch, and you're not able to use the DFAC. So soldiers will have money deducted even though they're not using the DFAC. Second, the Army is also taking away their daily food allowance, known as the government meal rate. I have a constituent in the 10th Combat Aviation Brigade currently at Camp Humphreys. The Army's bureaucratic jiggery-pokery will reduce his paycheck over $700 per month through the automatic DFAC deduction and stopping meal allowances. I want to repeat that, $700 per month. These soldiers are not going to Korea for a week or even a month, they're going for 9 months. And so when you lose $700 a month, that ends up being a good chunk of money. In contrast, a soldier at Camp Humphreys under the permanent change of station orders is apparently exempt from the automatic meal deduction. Aviation units such as the 10th CAB don't plan training or missions around the whims of the DFAC, as I've already talked about. That's why the food allowance exists in the first place. That's why it was there. And I would like to show you some pictures here of what's going on at the DFAC in Korea. There's a couple of pictures. Can we just slide through a few more? So these soldiers they're having their money automatically withheld, and then they're being forced to wait in an hour line in order to go through the DFAC. Some of them can't go through the DFAC at all because of missions. When they do go, they're waiting an hour, and that's 3 times a day. That's 3 hours a day where they're being delayed. And this is, again, this happens 3 times a day. I just want to get a commitment from you, General, that you'll do something for our soldiers who are flying, in many cases, high risk. And these are steady state missions. This isn't like a surprise. This isn't something that just came up. These are steady state missions at the DMZ. And number one, I want to make sure they get their meals. I want to make sure that they're not waiting in line for 3 hours 3 times a day. And I want to make sure they're not having their money taken away. Can you commit to me that you'll look into this?
Absolutely. And I'll come back to you personally on it. We've got not only the cab that you mentioned, but we have other rotational units, obviously, as a part of our readiness that rotate regularly on 9-month rotations. They're probably affected as well.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, before I yield back, I just want to note that, I want to introduce legislation to make sure that this is taken care of. Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Takai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Admiral Harris, General Scaparrotti, for being here. Admiral Harris, again, regarding the Aegis Ashore facility, or the hope for a facility, North Korea's nuclear test in January underscores the concern that we have that North Korea may develop the ability to place a bomb on a long-range ballistic missile that could reach the U.S. West Coast. I refer to public comments you made that converting the Aegis missile defense test site in Hawaii into a combat-ready facility is a good idea to help protect the U.S. mainland. Since we have assets on Kauai, why not use them? How would this permanent land version add to U.S. defense needs? And what would it take to integrate the site into a larger U.S. ballistic missile defense system?
Thanks, Congressman. Good to see you again. I believe that we need to do everything we can to defend our nation, and that's my job in the Pacific. I think the Aegis Ashore facility in Kauai is a national treasure, and we should use it to the best of our ability. And I think one of the ways that we could improve our national ballistic missile defense capability is by converting that to a permanent facility with interceptors. I mean, it seems reasonable to me, but it demands further study. It demands a lot of study. I think at the end of the day, we'll learn that what it will do, it will be able to defend Hawaii, and other systems we have would defend the continental United States. But that's good. I mean, I'm good with that. And that's what I've recommended, that we begin the study to see if it's feasible and what it would take to do it. There's not only the technical aspects of the architecture, the ballistic missile defense architecture. There's a political dynamic, as you well know, and the whole piece with increasing our footprint in Hawaii and all of that. So it's a whole effort that needs to be looked at. But I'm advocating it because I think we need to do it. I noted that after I made that statement, China objected, just as they have objected to the consultations we have with Korea to put THAAD in Korea. And I find it preposterous that China would insert itself in negotiations between us and our Korean ally on how best to defend our Korean ally and our Americans there, and they would interject themselves in our internal discussions on whether we should improve our ability to defend our own homeland.
Thank you. Actually, just a few days ago, China's foreign ministry spokeswoman compared the United States military infrastructure in Hawaii to China's land reclamation and strategic placement of missiles on disputed territory in the South China Seas. Can you just tell us your perspective on whether Hawaii should be and could be compared to the disputed territory in the South China Sea?
That statement that the Chinese spokesman made almost doesn't bear comment. I mean, it's ridiculous, and to me, it's indicative of the spokesperson's tone deafness.
I agree. In regards to the status of the rebalance, if U.S. defense spending remains limited to the cap set forth in the Budget Control Act of 2011 as amended, the so-called sequester levels, how might this impact the plans for bolstering U.S. force posture and presence in the Asia-Pacific region, and what might be the implications of maintaining deterrence and for operational risk in a potential combat situation?
As I've testified before, certainly at my confirmation hearing, that I think that if we were returned to sequester levels for the duration of the law out to the early 2020s, it will harm our ability dramatically, our ability to defend our nation. I think all that would be affected. And we're going through that now as we look at downsizing the Army. Should we do that? Where should those forces come from that would be part of the downsizing and everything? So I've testified before that I think that the continued sequester would hurt us significantly in our military readiness, and I stand by that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Byrne.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here today. Admiral Harris, let me ask you some questions about the Littoral Combat Ship Program. You've stated that the Littoral Combat Ship was a vital capability for you to engage through the Pacom area of operation. You've noted the LCS was needed to do missions not suited for DDGs, destroyers. How beneficial is having such a capability in your AOR to patrol waters not easily navigated by larger platforms?
Well, thanks for the question, sir. I mean, just by definition, I mean, if the Littoral Combat Ship is designed to operate in shallower waters than our destroyers and cruisers, I think in where we are now in Phase 0, the LCS is a terrific platform to work with our allies and partners in the region. I think that there's work, though, that could be done to the LCS to make the sea more sea, the combat part of Littoral Combat Ship. And I'm pleased that through the Senate and the House and the Congress writ large that we're looking at doing that. So we're going to, quote unquote, upgun the LCS. And I think that's terrific. I want our adversaries in the Pacific to think about the LCS the way I thought about the Nanuchkas, Osas, and Tarantulas of the Soviet Navy back in those days, back during the Cold War. We used to track and be concerned about those little tiny patrol boats that the Soviets had because they were missile-armed corvettes. And I want the Chinese and the Russians and other adversaries we might have to think about the LCS in that way. And I think we can think of it in that way if we put the right kind of missile on it and upgun it.
Of course, that's planned. As you know, the last, I think, 20 ships of the 52-ship buy would be frigates that would have the upgun and the more heavier platform. But I guess what I hear you saying is that because you're going to have so many of them, and it's a cost-effective way to have so many of them, that it's another way for us to project our strength in the maritime environment in a shallow draft environment we find in many of those islands.
That's correct. I stated when I was the Pacific Fleet Commander that I valued LCS. I believe there's a place for LCS in the Joint Force now that I'm the Pacom Commander, and I look forward to working with them as they come online.
You also mentioned how we're able to work with other nations and their navies with the Littoral Combat Ship. Could you expand on that some, please?
Sure. A lot of our friends and partners in the region have small navies, and they want to learn from us, or they want to learn from somebody, and I would rather they learn from us than other potential partners. And their navies are small, and when a cruiser comes in there, or even a DDG for that matter, it can overwhelm them. And so an LCS is the right platform to do that. It's also the right platform to train in areas shallower depths, just by definition, as I talked about. And the crews are smaller, so that footprint is smaller. And for that reason, I think in a partnership environment way, the LCS is, again, an ideal platform.
Let me ask you about another vessel. It's called the Joint High-Speed Vessel, or they just renamed it the EPF. And I understand that those vessels are getting some pretty good use in Pacom. This is a well-built ship with the ability to add a lot of additional capabilities. What do you see as the future of the Joint High-Speed Vessel, the EPF, in your AOR?
Yeah, I think it has a great potential for some of the mission sets that I have to be concerned about. More so the Pacific Fleet commander would worry about it. But the Joint High-Speed Vessel has a great ability to move a lot of things quickly. And by a lot of things, I mean troops and their equipment. The Army is using a version of that now in the Western Pacific. So I'm looking forward to the JHSV EPF coming online in greater numbers. I think that you could put an expeditionary field hospital, for example, on a JHSV and turn it into a hospital ship. We explored that in the last few months of my time as the Pacific Fleet Commander during Pacific Partnership. That's an exciting new capability that I think we should take a hard look at.
Well, thank you for your service, gentlemen, both of you, and I yield back.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for your service. The U.S. PAC Command has given authorization in the fiscal year 2016 NDAA's South China Sea Initiative to build our maritime security in the region and improve the domain awareness of our partners in the region. In your opinion, does this authority need to be expanded, and if so, what changes would you like to see made?
Sir, that's the Maritime Security Initiative. I'm pleased with where we are with it now. I think we'll get about $50 million this year for that. My team is working with OSD on that to figure out the best ways to improve the maritime domain awareness of some of the countries in the region, and I'm satisfied with where we are with that this year.
Thank you. General, anything you would add, General?
No, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Admiral, you mentioned in your testimony PAC Command's need for enduring cyber capability in the theater. Cyber warfare is undoubtedly a growing aspect of modern warfare and something we must strive to be ahead of as much as possible. Would making U.S. Cybercom a combatant command like CENTCOM help funnel focus and funding to a vitally important aspect of this new theater of warfare?
In my opinion, sir, Cybercom should be an independent combatant command.
Would you pull that mic closer?
Yeah, and in my opinion, sir, Cybercom should be an independent combatant command on the level of Pacom or CENTCOM, as you say. Currently, it's a subunified command under U.S. STRATCOM.
Do you have any thoughts on how Congress can be effective in helping bring that about?
No, sir. I think it's being addressed adequately within DOD, and ultimately the chairman will make his best military advice known to both the President and the Secretary, and a decision will be rendered, and I think that's appropriate in this case at this time.
Thank you. Thank you. General, anything to add?
No, sir. I would agree with Admiral Harris. I know it's under discussion now, and I think that DOD, as he said, is considering that and be handled in a normal process.
Thank you. Admiral, considering Vietnam's claims in the Spratly and Paracel Islands and rising patriotism in Vietnam and animosity towards China resulting from the 2014 oil rig standoff and Hanoi becoming the 8th largest arms importer from 2011 to 2015, a maritime dispute between China and Vietnam in the South China Sea has perhaps the greatest possibility for becoming a flashpoint in the region. However, in recent public discussions on the issue of the South China Sea, it's been surprising to understand the dearth of information on our engagement with Vietnam. Most of the focus has been instead on our defense treaty with the Philippines and their arbitration case. Moving forward, do you see a place for increased bilateral dialogue between the U.S. and Vietnam, and if so, what developments would you like to see?
Yeah. So I've made Vietnam and India focuses, I guess, of effort for Pacom. I think there are great opportunities in both countries for us to move forward in our relationship and partnerships in the region. So I'm excited by our opportunities in Vietnam, just for the reasons you mentioned. You know, they're a growing nation. They have a like view with us of China and our concerns in the South China Sea, and they are becoming a player on the world stage, and they're certainly a player in ASEAN. So I look forward to continuing our relationship with Vietnam. I appreciate the fact that we're able to increase our trade with Vietnam, including in the defense arena. I went to Vietnam when I was a Pacific Fleet commander, and I look forward to having the opportunity to go there as a Pacific Command commander.
All right, thank you. Anything to add, General?
Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. McSally.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, gentlemen. General Scaparrotti, you said earlier that should we have to be involved, God forbid, you know, in a military conflict on the peninsula, it would be more akin to Korea or World War II, complex, high casualty. Are you concerned at all? We've heard, you know, the service chiefs come before us in the last year, sequestration, the impact, and us being in 15 years of a counterinsurgency mindset has had a real impact on the readiness of units. I mean, the squadron I commanded was, you know, ready to head over there on 24 hours notice, but a lot of the readiness has really been degraded across the joint force that are on the TIPFID, ready to go for supporting that kind of contingency. Are you concerned at all about the real readiness levels of being able to respond quickly?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Yes, I am. As you know, all of our services are really coming out of a bathtub in readiness, and it's been improving because of the increased funding, and we appreciate that support. But it's going to be some time before our forces are at a point where all of the units have now been through training that prepares them really for a complex environment, high-intensity conflict. I can speak specifically of the Army.
Yeah.
It takes time for us to get units through those complex rotations at our national training centers. We've got younger generations who haven't combined fires, for instance, et cetera, fire and maneuver in large formations. Those are things in individual small unit and then larger unit training that's complex. So I am concerned about it. I know that all the services are focused on this, and we on the peninsula are as well. So when we do our exercises and we bring units in, that's the kind of training at each level that we're focused on.
Great. I'd be interested in following up a little bit more in the classified session as well, as far as the risks we're at right now. I think I also heard you say in the shortage of munitions that you mentioned that the potential cluster munition ban and the impact that would have on your ability to do your job. I just want to make sure I understood that. Neither the U.S. nor South Korea are signatories to the cluster munition ban. So can you just clarify what you meant? And if we were to become a signatory and those would be banned, what impact would that have on your mission?
That's correct. Neither are signatories. However, we have a policy, the U.S. has a policy, that in January of 19, we would essentially comply with the Oslo Treaty through policy.
So what impact would that have?
The impact for me would be significant because the majority of my munitions are cluster munitions that are affected by that policy. And of course, then what I'm concerned about, and the reason I'm bringing it up now, is we need to begin to replace those munitions so that I have the proper stockage for the first 30 days on site. Cluster munitions in and of themselves provide an effect that in this fight is very important and is very difficult to replicate with unitary rounds. So we need to get to a cluster munition. We need to keep this cluster munition until such time that we are able to produce a replacement that meets the less than 1% dud rate and we can produce it in numbers to meet my need.
But just to clarify, it would be best for the military mission that you have for that ban to not go into effect.
That's correct. That's what I mean. But we need to keep what we have and be able to use it until we can replace it properly.
Thank you. Admiral Harris, I'm going to talk a little bit about the ISIS threat and how you're seeing that in the whole theater. I mean, I'm on Homeland Security as well, looking at the foreign fighter flow. We know there's at least a couple thousand, coming from your theater, China, Indonesia, some from Australia that we're aware of. Also about a half a dozen, affiliates that have allegiance to ISIS. So and obviously the Jakarta bombing that ISIS claimed in January. Can you just talk about the trends you're seeing, and is there any concern with us or our allies in the direction this is going?
Yes, ma'am. It's a significant concern of mine, the numbers of fighters that are leaving Pacom countries and going to the fight.
Yeah.
Of greater concern are those, however, that are returning.
Coming back.
Because not only are they even more radicalized, now they're militarized and weaponized. And so that's a concern. I'm concerned about some of the trends I'm seeing in the region. In one of the countries recently, there was a Pew survey where over 50% of the respondents said it was okay to execute a Muslim who converted to some other religion. 30% of the respondents in that country said it was okay to use violence in the name of Islam. And that sounds like something coming right out of the pages of the ISIS handbook. So I worry about that quite a bit. I've made the comment in the past that there are more Muslims in the Pacom region than in Central Command.
Exactly.
And so the Islamic extremism is an area of concern, as I mentioned in my opening statement, and we look at that very closely. Unfortunately, Special Operations Command Pacific, SOCPAC, is there. And Admiral Kilrain is charged with monitoring that and having an effect on that.
Great, thanks. My time's expired. Thanks.
Mr. Langevin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Harris and General Scaparrotti, thank you very much for your testimony today and your service to our nation. For years now, we have underinvested in our EW capabilities. Our adversaries have actually invested heavily in those areas. Now, some of this you may not be able to go into an open session, but to the degree that you can, where are we held risk because of that underinvestment as we're shifting to the Asia-Pacific region, and how, per se, overmatched are we, and what areas do we further need to invest, and where are our adversaries' capabilities strongest? What keeps you awake at night should conflict ever break out, and we need to confront this?
Thanks, sir. In trying to dance on the unclassified side of this question, I'll say that I'm concerned about principally in the EW environment with Russia and China. I mean, they are our peer competitors in this. I think we are investing now more than we have been in electronic warfare, and our new concept, electronic warfare maneuver, I think is gaining a foothold in the Navy. And in the Joint Force. So I'm pleased with where we're moving along, though I think that we need to invest more in it, not only in terms of fiscal resources, but also in terms of tactical development.
General, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'd agree. I think that our investment in that's been periodic. And as a result, we've seen the need, started to respond to it, and then probably dropped off over time, I think specifically over the last 10 years. And we're now beginning to invest in that in terms of our people, our skills, and our assets. And I think we need to continue that.
Okay. Admiral Harris, in your testimony, you highlighted that the world's 300 foreign submarines, 200 are located in the Indo-Asia-Pacific region, and 150 of those belong to China, North Korea, and Russia. How is the United States keeping pace with this growing force in the region, and what investments need to be made to enhance our undersea and anti-submarine warfare capabilities, as well as to our anti-access and area denial strategies?
So one of the biggest asymmetric advantages that the United States enjoys over any peer competitor or other competitor in the world is our undersea warfare capability. The submarine gives us an advantage over any other adversary we might face. Unfortunately, those adversaries recognize that, and they are improving and increasing their own anti-submarine warfare and undersea warfare capabilities. Clearly, while our submarines are far and away better, in my opinion, today, quantity has a quality all its own, and the numbers of Russian and Chinese submarines, particularly Chinese submarines, are a matter of concern. I think the Russian submarine force never took a hiatus at the end of the Cold War, and we're seeing some very impressive platforms come out of Russia, including the Dolgoruki that I mentioned earlier, the SSBN. So I think that we must continue to invest in our undersea warfare capabilities, not only in terms of numbers of submarines, but in improving the submarines that we have. I think the Virginia payload module, for example, is fantastic. We can't get enough of them, and the capabilities that it brings to the fight.
Very good. Thank you. I'd like to shift, if I could, to cyber. And I have a very good understanding of our cyber capabilities. But again, as we're shifting to the Asia Pacific, and we're going to be partnering more closely with our allies in the region, where is your level of confidence in their cyber capabilities? Should we need to partner with them, and should conflict break out? I know the challenges that we've faced in securing our own systems, but the degree that we're going to be dependent on our allies in the region and their cyber capabilities, which may be not as robust as what ours are.
Thanks, sir. I'll defer to General Scaparrotti for the specifics of your question with regard to Korea. He has some ideas on that, but in general, I'm concerned about it. You know, as we work on this with our allies, friends, and partners, you know, we're the strongest only the weakest link in the chain, and cyber could be that weak link. And so their vulnerability to intrusion and exploitation is a matter of concern to me.
Sir, I'd echo Admiral Harris's point with respect to Korea as well. We have a good working relationship in terms of our two joint cyber centers and our cyber domain work overall, but it's initial, it's new, and it's developing, and it needs to develop rapidly because we have a threat. North Korea is active every day. And so my concern is that we act with enough focus and we act fast enough and with enough assets. The second thing I would say, when you're into that domain, each country has their own concerns about protection of information and capabilities, and so it's an area that's very difficult to work in the collaborative way that you need to at times as well. And that's something we've got and other nations have to work their way through in order to really close the gaps that we've got to close in our systems.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Ms. Gabbard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, welcome. Aloha. I'm not going to harp on this, but I will mention it quickly. I know it's been talked earlier about the Aegis Ashore on Kauai and just the paramount importance of protecting Hawaii and the United States from North Korea's threat. But Admiral Harris, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about India. I know you have a trip very soon to go and visit India. Two things. There is a potential sale of 8 F-16s to Pakistan that I and other members of Congress have expressed very serious concerns about, given the fact that Pakistan has long harbored and given safe haven to various terrorist groups that continue to launch destabilizing attacks within India as well as Afghanistan. The recent release of Hafiz Saeed, one of the masterminds of the 2008 Mumbai terrorist attack, where 6 U.S. citizens were killed, even at the protests of the United States. There are a number of other concerns that we have, but in particular, I'm wondering if you can talk about how, as you and others have spoken of the importance of this opportunity to strengthen our relationship with India as we head into a strong partnership into the future and the benefits that that brings us. What impact could this sale of F-16s have on our relationship with India and the work that you and others are doing to strengthen that?
That's a great question and timely too, ma'am, because I go to India on Monday to keynote the Raisina Dialogue event in New Delhi. I view India as our great strategic opportunity in Pacom, and we need to do as much as we can with India in a mill-to-mill sense and in every other sense. We have a terrific ambassador there in Richard Verma, who is looking aggressively at ways to improve our relationships with India across the board, and I'm excited by that. With regard to the sale of F-16s to Pakistan, while I don't have a professional opinion on that sale itself, certainly it will affect some aspect of our relationship with India. I know that I'll be asked about it when I go to India, and I hope to be able to tell them that that sale is just one aspect of many military sales that we make across the world, and that we view our relationship with India very importantly. And I hope that we can work through this sale and their perception of it to continue to improve our relationship with India.
Yeah, thank you. I think this is something that they'll definitely bringing up with you at that dialogue, in particular because of the recent attack at their Air Force base and the terrorist organization behind that being from Pakistan. What do you see here really as the next critical steps towards strengthening that U.S.-India partnership? So
we are moving out aggressively in the technical field with the DTTI initiative that Undersecretary Kendall is pushing, and I think that's excellent. There are some what we call foundational agreements that have to be executed with partner nations in order to move, quote unquote, to the next level. And we were working with India on the signing of those foundational agreements. One of those is the LSA, Logistics Support Agreement, which allows us to do cross-servicing, acquisition cross-servicing, for example. Another one is called SISMOA, and it involves communication security so that we can be assured that India will protect our communications as we would protect theirs. And so these are foundation agreements that we enact with every country we work with. We have not gotten to the point of signing them with India, but I think we're close. We're closer now than we ever have been, and I'm encouraged by what I'm hearing from my colleagues in India, and I look forward to having that discussion with them when I go there next week.
Great. Thank you, Admiral Harris. I appreciate the leadership that you've taken, in particular on strengthening this relationship and recognizing the importance of it in our overall strategy within the Asia-Pacific. Thank you.
Mr. Rourke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral, I'd like to ask you to discuss and provide some guidance for me and others on how to approach the issue of cost sharing for our obligations and the benefits that we provide in the Pacific. The easy way for me to look at it when it comes to Europe is through the 27 other NATO members who have a target of spending at least 2% of GDP on defense, even though only 4 of them today are doing that. But it's something that I can ask of our allies who enjoy the benefit of the U.S.'s disproportionate presence there and defense capacity. How should I look at that when it comes to Asia and the Pacific?
A great question, sir. And I think that that the NATO model, as I mentioned before, doesn't work for the Pacific. So you have to look at each of our treaty allies individually and look at that subset of treaty allies where we have major concentrations of U.S. forces. And who's the greater beneficiary of that, or who are the beneficiaries of that? Certainly part of the beneficiary of us having a large carrier strike group, Marine Expeditionary Force presence in Japan is us. You know, we're there for us and the values that we hold dear and what's important to the United States. Certainly it's a benefit to Japan. And so our obligation to Japan under our treaty is to defend them, and their obligation to us under that same treaty is to provide us a place from which we can defend them. So that's simplistic, but that sort of gets at that issue. And so they provide us an enormous host nation funding level, which I promised I would get to you in the closed session, to foot the bill, if you will, for U.S. forces that are based in Japan. And that model extends to Australia, for example. We're undergoing host nation funding discussions with Australia now as we move a sizable Marine and Air Force presence to Darwin and Tyndall. And the level of that funding and how much it should be is the subject of negotiation. We certainly get a benefit from operating out of Australia, as do the Australians. Singapore is another case, a very important case. Singapore is not a treaty ally, but it's certainly an important strategic partner of us. And they allow us to put our littoral combat ships, to rotationally deploy them out of their nation. And they've agreed to allow us to operate rotationally P-3s and P-8 surveillance and reconnaissance aircraft. And we get that benefit from operating out of Singapore because of our interest in the South China Sea, the Strait of Malacca, and the Eastern Indian Ocean.
Yeah. All of that makes sense, and I think that same logic could extend to our presence in Europe. Mm-hmm. And yet there we have a very defined commitment from our allies there. As you outline some of the challenges that we face, a rising China, a resurgent Russia, just to name two, and some of the investments that you're going to ask, or the Department of Defense and the administration will ask the taxpayer to make, all of which I think are sound. I think it's also an appropriate time to think about what our allies and other beneficiaries in the Asia-Pacific region should expect to contribute. And we, the taxpayer, the representatives, should have a clear understanding of that. And I don't know if General Scaparrotti, if you want to talk about Korea as an example with the THAAD batteries and Patriot missile battery deployments there, use that as an example. What part of that cost is shared by Korea? I understand the benefit to us of having our service members and those defenses there. What does Korea share in that?
I would just say that this is a unique alliance with the U.S. ROC alliance that's started and has grown since the Korean War. And in this case, we've got a treaty partner and a partner that spends 2.5% over, pretty routinely each year in their defense, and they spend portions of their defense money to meet commitments that we've agreed upon mutually that they need to develop in order to strengthen the alliance. And in the closed session, we can talk specifically about that. Secondly, through negotiations, they also, called a Special Measures Agreement, they annually pay a certain percentage of the cost of U.S. forces to be stationed in Korea and assist in their defense. So I think it's a good construct. They're great partners in this respect, and they've been true to, they have the same funding challenges that we have, but they've been true to meeting their commitments in that respect.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Duckworth.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Harris, it's good to see you here again. My question is actually for General Scaparrotti. It has to do with the Army's ARI and how that is going to affect the combat aviation brigades in Korea. In Korea, the Army will be relying on rotational forces if this ARI is complete, as opposed to a cab that's stationed there. The National Commission on the Future of the Army recommended keeping a CAB permanently assigned to the peninsula because short-term rotations, and I'm quoting, short-term rotations will not permit aviation units the time needed to properly mitigate risks posed by the threat situation in Korea. And specifically, rotating units will not have time to master the geographic and environmental conditions well enough to operate effectively and safely in the region. Obviously, Korea is a country with numerous terrain and extreme weather conditions. Our aviation crews there will have to be able to operate in all sorts of environments, and they are, but a permanently assigned unit there, I think, will be better able to handle and maintain proficiency. Permanently stationing a CAB in Korea would come with a significant upfront price tag as well as enduring costs. So despite the operational concerns, the fiscal reality is that it just might not be realistic. Your written testimony lays out an array of complex threats that we face on the peninsula, so I think that despite the cost, it's worth discussing. As a commander, which force structure, a rotational force or permanently stationed combat aviation brigade, do you feel best enables you to meet the threats and operational needs in the peninsula?
Thank you for the question. We have a permanently stationed combat aviation brigade there now, and there is discussion about perhaps going to a rotational one. I completely agree with the Commission in terms of this is an environment that's difficult to fly in, mountainous weather. It's an environment that they also have to fly in close proximity to an adversary that will shoot at them.
Right.
And the third, we have mission sets there that are joint in nature. We do a lot of work with our air and our naval forces off the coast. And as a result of that, it's very difficult to get pilots to that level of proficiency, come into the peninsula, and in a 9-month rotation be able to sustain that, because some of that simply has to be done on the peninsula after they arrive. And because of that, I've said that I do not agree with a rotational force in Korea. I think it will produce a less ready force, and also it'll be more dangerous for our crews.
Thank you. Do you think politically, well, for our ally militaries, do you think a rotational force will signal to the ROK a decrease in U.S. commitment to the region's defenses? Is there a perception on their side that switching to a rotational force would give them?
Well, I think the key to this is what force you do rotate and their readiness when they arrive. For instance, I agree with the forces that re-rotate today. We're now rotating an armored brigade, for instance. And the ROKs are fully supportive of this. But our commitment is that we deliver one that's combat ready, fully manned, and also has been trained culturally for that environment. That's something that we have to do. And I think as long as I know for the Republic of Korea, as long as we meet that commitment, they will be supportive of using a rotational force. Now, I think there's a certain base that we have there that's permanent, and we've got to maintain that. You couldn't go to a larger percentage of that rotational force. I personally wouldn't be in support of that. But for the specific needs that we have today that we've asked for rotational force, it's been productive.
Okay, great. Thank you. I want to transfer on to whether or not the Korean wartime operational control transfer is ever really going to happen. Are the ROK, we've pushed this off. Do you think they'll ever be ready? Are there conditions that need to be in place, metrics that we're looking for?
First, yes, they will be ready. They're a modern force, and they're working hard to, one, improve their capabilities, but also build the capabilities they need. In the OPCON transition plan, that was, again, another step was taken that in October between the two secretaries. We've laid out in detail the capabilities that they have to meet, and we're now working on the next layer of that that provides the timelines on each of those capabilities. Generally, we've agreed on those in the past. We're confirming those this year, and they're already working on most of those as well. So, yes, I think there will be an OPCON transition. I too believe that it should be conditional, not time-based. And in the closed session, I can talk a little more detail on the commitments that we've mutually made to ensure that we can bring that about.
Okay, thank you. I look forward to that classified briefing. Thank you.
Admiral, Mr. Rourke made a passing reference to Russia. We see increasing Russia in Europe, in the Middle East. Are you seeing that in the behavior of their ships and planes and so forth?
I am, Mr. Chairman. We're seeing in the Pacific, as I mentioned before, their new Dogaruki class SSBN. I remind folks that there are 3,000 miles of Russian coastline that's in my area of responsibility, including 6 major strategic bases from which they deploy their submarines, their ships, and their long-range bomber aircraft. We're seeing long-range bomber aircraft patrols increasing in East Asia. They circumvented Japan just recently, and their ship task forces are operating in the region as well.
We often don't think of Russia in your theater, but as you just described, they have a big presence there.
Yes, sir. I think of them often.
I appreciate the fact that you do. I recently had someone say that they were meeting with a Chinese official who said explicitly, "You are the past, we are the future." I think many of us had not expected the degree of aggression, provocation, just within the past few years that we see from China. Do you believe that that is their attitude, and do you have a reason why we are seeing it seemingly sped up, certainly in their activities in the South China Sea?
Mr. Chairman, I do believe that that's their attitude. As I testified yesterday, I think they have a goal of certainly regional hegemony, and they would like to see the United States out of what they consider their affairs. But I think that their provocations are causing the other countries in the region to look hard at their relationships with China, and they are turning to the United States as their security partner of choice. And you have to ask yourself why these countries who were formerly leaders in the non-aligned movement, for example, are turning away from China and turning toward the United States, not only giving us access to their bases for our ability to operate, but increasingly in terms of trade and military interoperability. So I think that the statement that from China that quote, we are the future, near the past, unquote, I think that's another indication of the tone deafness of the spokesman who made that comment.
Fair point. The key for us then is to be a reliable, credible partner for these nations who are turning to us, and that gets back to the responsibilities of this committee in part. Thank you both for being here and testifying. I think if it's okay with y'all's schedule, what I'd like to do is just within about 5 minutes or so reconvene upstairs in our SCIF 2337 and continue on a classified or have a classified discussion. But for now, this hearing stands adjourned.
Thank you.